Dear friends, in the seductive world of love and money, people easily lose their dignity and morality. Many people do not hesitate at the expense of morality. When your part overwhelms the human part, they act instinctively, despite the voice of conscience, ignoring all social norms. There are those who dare to step on public opinion and live just to satisfy desire and mediocre material desires. But in the end, does life revolve around money? It brings happiness. This story is not just a wake-up call. It's also a profound lesson in human philosophy. Only if you know enough people to find true peace and happiness. In the midst of a challenging life, I'd like to invite you and your friends. Listen to the short story, Last Night's Riding Voice of Queen Wang. Congratulations to you and your friends. There are moments when listening to stories is relaxing. It's a cold winter afternoon. It got dark earlier than usual. Walking down the old village road, muddy feet, skinny hands trembling. As he pulled the thin jacket over his chest, the cold flowed through each layer of fabric. Blowing into the flesh makes me shiver. It's been 15 years since I've been back here. The scene doesn't seem to change. There's still old red-roofed houses, the bare old banyan trees in the courtyard. But people are different. Tung is no longer the boy of old. He's not a young man either. It was as hopeful as leaving the village. His gate appeared in front of Han's eyes, wooden door creaking, like lamenting under the weight of years. That old house, with the silver paint and the crumbling walls, now it's just a relic of the past. Stop in front of the gate, looking deep into the cold moss field. Familiar feeling creeping through the mind. But it's not the warmth of a childhood. It's the haunting grief. From the distance, a small call. That's Tung. The startled back. A scrawny figure with a hunched back. Hand crutches appear in the afternoon shadow. My grandmother's clouded eyes. The old neighbor towards you. She stopped. Her dry lips fluttered with suspicious eyes. Is it really you? The killer is back? You don't talk loud, but her voice echoed through space. Quiet as judge, harsh judgment fell on your head. Tung just stood still and did not respond to her private words. No excuses, no objections. Those words no longer hurt me. 15 living in torment is enough. I've learned to accept. Inside the musty air that's filled, the old stuff is still there, covered in dust. It's as if time has stopped since that fateful night. I remember that day when it rained. The house is in darkness. My grandmother is in bed, weak breathing after days of illness. I can't sleep, I can't sleep. Eyes towards the ceiling. The wind was howl outside, insects echoing into the quiet space. The sound of his mother's silent footsteps echoed. In the middle of a quiet night, I sit up, my heart beats fast. Eyes follow the dim shadow at the end of the hallway. Your mother wears a thin nightgown, long hair, touching the shoulder. He walked softly towards his grandfather's room. The old wooden door opened, and there was a creaking sound. Stopping and holding my breath, I sit still and feel the air around me suddenly became suffocating. His eyes stopped at the corner. That used to be my grandfather's room. Everything is intact, but the image of the night he was murdered is clear in your mind. Tung closed his eyes, trying to dispel the horrible memories, but they just hang on and they don't let go. That night, everything changed. The death of my father, the betrayal of my mother, grandmother's painful look. They are all images that can't be forgotten. I walk to the corner, stand silently in front of my grandmother's picture. Who endured it all, who sacrificed everything for this family, only to end in tragedy. Granny, I'm back. Tung whispered, a choking voice, as if expecting an answer from the ghosts of the past. But the house only responded with eerie silence. When Tung faced the empty house, she called in from outside. Will you see your mother again? I heard she left to be a prostitute in the city a long time ago. No one knows when to die. He looked straight, without any expression. I don't know. Tung lowered his head deep into the darkness of the house, but sound from the outside world, the villagers whispered. The winds howl through the door, as silent judgments. I remember the peaceful years with my family. 3 small spaces of the Tung family, nestled at the end of the dirt road, surrounded by lush greenery. Even though life is lacking, but laughter, the throbbing voices of my mother and grandmother, always echoing through the house of happiness. Tung's mother is gently beautiful, with an elegant figure and sparkling eyes. In those days, Tung was just a carefree 5-year-old boy, always running around the yard. Sometimes I hear my grandmother call in. "This guy doesn't get tired all day. Come drink water and play." Happy to smile softly. "Mom, let it play, let it run. Let it run." My mother and grandmother looked at me with loving eyes. The family is poor, but poverty can't take away warmth. I grew up with the love of my mother and grandmother. I don't know that my life, it's about to change forever. One day, Tung's father sat by the rice plate, a face full of thought. He put down 8 chopsticks and looked at the happiness with worried eyes. "Honey, I think we should go. There's nothing here. I'm going to borrow some money to do business abroad. Maybe a few years back, we're out of poverty." He holds the chopstick but doesn't eat anymore. You know, life is hard, but the husband went abroad to leave her mother and son. It's something you never thought about. Happy voice choking. "You're gone. I know how to live. Are you sure you're safe to go?" He sighed, patting his wife's shoulder. "There's no other way. There will always be poor. I promise I will send you money to take care of you." After many days of thinking, yes, the family decided to borrow money from relatives. I hope this trip will be a chance to change your life. But the day my father left came. The people in the village saw him off at the pier. Eyes that push hope. But that was also the last time they saw him. After Tung's father crossed the border, news from you is slowly disappearing. Everyone in the village started talking. The rumors about the dangers of cross-border journeys appear more and more. The neighbor whispered to others. "I heard that some people also went along that wave without returning. He must have died in the land of man." The others have a sad voice. The sin of being a young widow. If the husband does not come back, the debt is piled up. Rumors of Tung Lan's father's death spread quickly throughout the village. But virtue is resilient. You can't believe your husband is dead. Every day I hope to hear from you. Whenever someone knocks on the door, they rush to open it. But not from my husband. As time goes by, the hope of happiness fades away. She told her mother-in-law that her voice was choking. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Debt is heavy and there is no money." Her mother comforted her. "I try to get up, keep working, and everything will be fine." That afternoon, follow a friend up the mountain to see a fortune teller. Goddess people will always be hungry. Your little boy has a family etching number. Disaster from their Ray. Even if you don't believe, but I always remember the words of the Lord. Back home, due to her busy work, she also forgot the words of the hungry teacher. Life is not as easy as your mother-in-law says. Loans to let your husband go. There is no way to pay now. Every day I have to do all sorts of things. From carrying calves to carrying rented water. The pressure of money and life. More and more weight on your shoulders. The swinging eyes of the men in the village began to appear. More than they look happy. Not just a beautiful widow, but an opportunity. Mr. Sun, the neighbor standing by the fence, glanced at the happiness. Beautiful young people like this you do not like. But it's too rich. I don't know if I can live forever. Mr. Tuan winked at Mr. Sun hoarse voice. I bet it won't be long. Just a few sweet words. I'm glad to see those eyes. At first she tried to keep her distance, avoid those dark looks. But time goes by, with money increasingly scarce and worry for his son's future. Happiness gradually feels stuck. One day, sitting sighing on the front steps of the house, a man from the village came. He smiled and looked at the happiness with a hidden eye. Mr. Lamb's sweet voice. Are you glad you didn't come to my house? My wife just left. I have some money that can help you carry the burden. I was shocked by Mr. Lin's blatant words. You stare at him, hands clasped to the shirt. The cold voice cheats. What are you talking about? I don't need AI help. Mr. Lin laughed. His eyes did not leave happiness. He said as he approached, "You think the whole village knows you're in need? As long as you agree, I'll pay you back. What's easier than that? Turn your face away full of anger, but deep in my soul, I know that what you say is not absurd. The poor, the needy, and the fear for your son grows in you." Offers like that of Mr. It doesn't just come from one person. Gradually, the whole village was whispered to each other that, "Happy, if you need money, you just need a little bit of help." And slowly start to feel helpless. In my life, speak to yourself with your eyes closed. Is there any other way to take care of Tung? The eyes, the offers, and the pressures. Money is getting bigger. Happiness is gradually caught up in the cycle of stalemate, where self-respect being tested in the face of lack, and seductions from men in the village. Then life is no longer peaceful days. It's starting to take a new path, full of waves and challenges. The more I wait for my husband to lose hope. I want a beautiful woman at the age of 30. But life soon pushed her into poverty. Debt piled up. Your eyes are getting dark. And the smiles before Kia are now gone. I started doing a lot of hard work to make money, take Tung to school, but the poor will never let go. You're not just struggling with life. They are also judged by society, whispered about his miserable fate. One day, his best friend in his youth was Lan. "Come to me with an offer." Lan softened her face hesitantly. "I know you're in trouble. If you want, I've got a way to make money fast. Not a lot of work, but money right away." Frown your worried eyes at Lan. "How easy is that? Let's be clear. I know some people need the service. How many times have I done it? Just take one trip and you'll make 500,000, enough to pay for Tung's education." Standing in silence, eyes wide open. You know what Lan is talking about. A sense of fear and shame rising within her. But money worries weigh heavily. You can't refuse right away. That day I sat in front of my house. Shaky hands squeezed the old cloth bag. In the heart of everything tangled Ren and choked. The road seems to have brought you to the end. But she knew she couldn't let her son drop out of school. You can't let debt pile up like this forever. The offers are full of mystery, of the men in the village. It makes you more tired. You don't want to live like this, but you have another choice. That night, Lan called again. I said this, if you get a bigger change this time. What are you going to do? This time, hearing such a large amount of money, her heart welled up again. 2 million in just a few hours. She bowed her head and said nothing. The thoughts in my head keep spinning. Talk to Lan. I've got to do something. I don't want to do this either. But the debt is growing. I have no choice. Is a comforting voice. I understand that everyone has to have a hard time. But think about it. Just do it once. Take care of your child's debts. I'm not young anymore. You can start again later. Sit still with your eyes on the distance. Lan is not wrong, but you can trade your self-respect for money later. After many nights of thinking, I decided to try it. She told herself to do it only once to take care of you and pay off the debt. It was a late afternoon when darkness fell on the village. The motorcycle taxi that Lan arranged in advance. The mind is empty, all the way her heart is pounding. Sweat on the forehead. She looked around, afraid that the eye would recognize her. Afraid that the whispers will follow her back to the village. When you arrive or meet an older man, belly plush dress, up. He looked at her from head to toe with a smile. You are happy, right? It is worth 8 rice. Happy silent exchange, hand-tightening cloth bag. You feel humiliated and ashamed. But when you think about debt, she closed her eyes. He took a deep breath and walked into the room where the man pointed. Taking money from a man. After the service is over, her hands fluttered 2 million VND. That's a lot of money you have to make a month. Recently earned before, but now it's in her hands after just a few hours. The smiling man patted his shoulder happily. You did great. I'll call you next time. Smiling but not paying. Your words leave the house. Walk out into the street without your feet touching the ground. The feeling of shame filled her heart. But then it's overwhelmed by the money in your hand. Money is easy to make. It's too easy to forget the shame. Courage whispers to yourself, keep your eyes on the money. It's just making money, who knows? The days after that, happiness gradually feels easier. When you're deep into this work, at first you just did it. Sometimes I get invited by some men. Every time like that, she was relieved that the money was increasing. Feeling relaxed, make money easily. I don't think about judgmental eyes anymore. One day Lan came to see Happiness, holding a smiling cup of coffee. How to get rich a few more times. Do you need me to add more? The door sighed. There is no other option, Lan. I didn't want to, but now I have to. Your debt is full. Lan nodded sympathetically. Yes, you can withdraw after finishing it, but I have an idea. Or let's set up our own group. All the sisters in the village. Daytime cycling. A night drive does a little more. They have money and privacy. No one knows. Think about it. You know what Lan says is not unreasonable. If you form a team, you can control the work and even make more money. The idea is getting more and more appealing. So there's a group of women in the village. People who are in the same situation with established virtue. They call themselves the Old People's Sports. During the day, they cycle and exercise all over the village. But night comes, they turn into night riding girls, serving the rich men. Tired of family life. Lan is both cycling and talking quietly with Happiness. Just do this, who knows? During the day, we ride together, help each other make money at night. There's no need to worry. Happy, smiling, nodding, her eyes sparkling. Maybe this is the best. At least make money in private. At first the work went quite well. The Old People's Sports Festival became a perfect cover. Rich men in the village. And they're coming from the neighborhood endlessly. Be a group leader. People who run everything. Assign work and collect money for the team. Tung's house on an early winter morning. The sky is gray. An unusually quiet space. Family meals are becoming more and more empty. I sat at the table looking out the window. I love the necklace you just bought. Tung sat across from him hesitantly. Mom, you've been out late lately. I'm worried. She smiled and put the rice down on the table. My cold eyes turned to look at my son. Her voice was soft but challenging. I'm busy with a new job. You don't have to worry. Money is enough, right? Looking at my mother in my heart caused anxiety. My mother's tenderness seems to have disappeared a long time ago. Instead, it's insensitive eyes and a smile full of distance. But you've changed. I don't understand you. Stand up without saying more. Just walk towards the door. Put on a black shoe jacket. Then step outside. I stood silently watching the shadow fade away in the fog of a cold morning. I no longer feel guilty or humiliated. Money covers all the feelings. You've become a different woman now. Coldly calculated and not. I think about moral values that you once cherished. Speak with Lan. I push determination. You just need money, Lan. Nothing else matters. I've decided I will not go back to my poor life. Happiness is not just a weak woman, alienated by society, to be the head of a women's union. Night riding. The Night Riding Club has been around for 5 years. Right now, she became a rich and beautiful lady. One evening, standing in the eco-zone, eyes far away towards the tents that the guild set up for the night sport, she crossed her arms in front of her chest, inching a winning smile. When you see the sneaking shadows of the girls entering the tent of the rich men, money flows into your pocket every night. It's easier than any job you've ever done before. Speak with Lan confident voice. See, the women in this group are also smart. Do less, but make more money. That's what matters. Lan nodded with bright eyes. You're good, happy. Not many poor people since the founding of this society. They both laughed while the lights from the tent singing dim. The girls are receiving guests. Everything happens as the plan of happiness. Fast and discreet, and no one knows. Happiness is not just an organizer, but also a key figure. Attract the men in the village, even from the neighborhoods. With charming looks and ingenuity in words, you can easily make anyone who meets you fall in love. One evening when the club was playing sports, a group of men came to see Happiness. There's Mr. Kwong, a rich man. Used to be the owner of a big lumber mill in town. He looked at Happiness from head to toe. The eyes revealed a desire. Mr. Kwong laughed hoarsely. Glad to hear your name for a long time. Give me a chance to play sports with you tonight. I didn't answer right away. She just looked at Mr. Eyes are sharp but full of slack. You know men like him. I always like the challenge. I like to feel conquered. Smooth voice. Cycling is not enough, Mr. Kwong. If you want to be stronger, you have to be more challenging. Dare you not? The whole group of men laughed. Kwong laughed Theo, but his eyes were fixed on Happiness. Her challenge only made him more interested. Glad to know that. She walked slowly towards him. He lowered his head and whispered in his ear. Something that makes you laugh louder. More excited. These nights continue to happen. And the night fund is getting more and more guests. The girls in the guild as well as Happy become a symbol of seduction and hidden sin. They're not just cycling in the morning, but also take long trips in the evening. Go to other areas to expand your business. A girl in the guild said with her eyes lit up. Happy sister, I got a lot of money from the guest yesterday. Every time I go with him, it's $1 million. I didn't expect it to be that easy. Happy smiling voice satisfied. Keep it up. Whatever men like, I give them a treat. Money is important. What does it feel like to remember forever? I know very well the cost of falling, but you don't care anymore. You've lost a lot of things in your life, but now you have power. She had money, and that helped her forget all her shame. Before, in the village of heaven, it's become a symbol of laziness and power. Underground force. Men are envious of you, and women are jealous of you. They knew that their husband might have been involved, but dare not speak up. They are afraid of you and happy to know that. One day the grandmother, the wife of a frequent guest of Virtue, comes to see her. Her eyes were full of anger, but the voice tried to stay calm. Virtue, whatever you do, don't touch my husband. I know it all. Happy to laugh. The eyes are challenging. She walked closer to her grandmother. Put your hand on her shoulder as if comforting. You're right. Your husband came to me, not because I forced him to. If he's bored with you, that's your job. Don't blame me. Granny reface. His lips trembled, but he could not say another word. Glad to know your position. You've become the person that all women are in the village to respect and fear. Virtue. Deeper and deeper into the cycle of power. The girls in the club depend on you. See you as a guide. They no longer care about moral values that you once cherished. The temptation of money has clouded it all. Glad to see Lan say definitely. I don't care what anyone says. My life is too hard. Now I just want to live. As long as you have money. Lan nodded in agreement, happy. If I don't do that, who cares about me? Men are just games. The night riding of the party goes on. Every night is a new game with men, and a lot of money goes into the pockets. You no longer feel regret or shame. Time goes by. Night sports trips, leading by Virtue, is becoming more and more obvious. At first it was very discreet. But the whispers in the village about the daytime exercise bike rides and night parties gradually Lan Raya. The wives in the village, people who used to believe my husband is merely participate in sports activities, start to be suspicious. One day while doing laundry at the well, she sat in silence filled with doubt. She recently discovered my husband used to sneak out at night. that every time it comes back, it's extraordinarily satisfying compared to normal exercise bike rides. She whispered to her neighbor tomorrow. Have you noticed that your men have been mysterious lately? I highly doubt there's something wrong. I've heard the rumors in the village. Mrs. Mai nodded in agreement with the suspicious voice. I've heard you guys keep pouring out for exercise. That comes home late at night. Maybe it's their gym. Is it something else? She decided to find out the truth. A quiet night. She decided to sneak out and follow her husband. When the darkness comes down, she saw her husband sneak out of the house as usual. He doesn't know that from a distance. She's watching his every move. He went straight to the meeting point of the night riding, where Virtue and girls often gather. From a distance, she saw the tents. The faint light from inside sings right. You can't hear very well, but the shadows are dim. With the poses of girls ejected from inside the tent, with the men, it made her understand right away that something was wrong. Granny in anger red eyes. She even thought she was right. They dared to cross her. Mrs. Lee didn't wait any longer. She went straight to the camp screaming in the middle of the crowd. She screamed with great anger. You think you can fool us forever? I know it all, old bastard. Get out here now. Everyone in the camp was startled. The men and girls in the tent panicked, glad to be leading the kids. I can hear your grandmother scream. No drowning. She came out of a tent across from her grandmother. Happy mouth, cold voice. Why are you here? Men need to have fun. If you can't hold them, don't blame them. The confrontation between Virtue and Reason, it caught the attention of everyone in the camp. The men are confused, and the girls in the night riding party were bowing their faces. She painted Mrs. Lee's eyes. Mrs. Lee approached Happiness. Her eyes widened with anger. You are a dishonest person. I'll tell everyone. This dirty game of yours, it can't be long. Happiness still keeps a pale smile on her lips. To face the anger of the nun without flinching. Happy to laugh with sarcasm. Go ahead and talk, but I'm sure of one thing. No matter what you say, your husband will come to me. What men need, but you can't give them. The cold words of Happiness, as if cutting into her heart. She knew her husband had changed, but listen to those challenges from the heart. The more oranges you get. She screamed tears and cursed. You didn't just humiliate my family, you've ruined this village. I'm not going to leave it alone. I'll do it for everyone. Everyone knows your true face. It was good to stand still with ice-cold eyes looking at her. Your threats are nothing to you. You've come too far to worry about being discovered. She believed that her money and power were sufficient to control everything. Looking straight into her eyes, she said clearly, whatever you say, but don't forget you're the one who's out of control. She couldn't keep her husband, so she blames him now. The grandmother said no more words. She turned and left the camp in anger. The next day, story of Virtue and fast night riding ran throughout the village. Other wives began to emerge. Together, they try to stop their husband. Continue to participate in night sports of Happiness. Mrs. Mai whispered to her worried voice. I know my husband is involved in this, but let's stop them. She was determined to keep her eyes on fire. We have to speak up together. We can't let it keep deceiving us forever. The Virtue it has to pay. Along with her testimony, many other wives have also talked about your husband. Joining the villagers began to boycott, who used to see her as a resilient woman. Now I despise you. After the night riding group disbanded and land scandal spread throughout the village, be at the center of every look. The eyes from the village. It's no longer respect or admiration. Instead, it's contempt and contempt. The wives whispered about the change of behavior, while the men still couldn't take their eyes off her, with lust, even if no one comes close. That morning I went to the market. On the shoulder wearing a basket, eyes looking straight. You don't pay attention to the crowd talking about you. Mrs. Lee came to Tai said quietly to Mrs. Mai in a disdainful voice, this is the hour. No one comes near it anymore. He ruined his life for a little dirty money. Mrs. Mai added in a sour voice, just for the money. That dirty job is over, and his life is nothing. Walk through the crowd and hear the whispers. But I don't care anymore, my cold eyes. Not showing emotions, it seems like your heart has hardened. You're so used to the isolation of people, used to show pity, and too tired to react. There is only one thing left in happiness: money. It's like muttering in your mouth to yourself. Whatever you say, I just need the money. The market was crowded that day, but no one comes close to happiness. The greengrocers who sell fish all shy away, or just give it to her reluctantly, eyes full of contempt. She sold the fish with a grin and gave the fish to Happiness and muttered, "What person? It's so beautiful." And you hit the road. How many other ways can women make a living? Why do you have to do that? Others standing nearby laughed softly in a whisper. Money is easy to make. Just lie on your back and you've got money. Who doesn't like? Glad to hear it all but say nothing. Squeeze your hands into the basket, but say whatever you want, even though I know your reputation. But the natural charm and the cold in the eyes of Happiness still make men here can't take their eyes off. After buying it, go home still in silence. On the road, she saw her mother-in-law standing with a friend. What are they saying to each other? Mrs. Land's eyes looked at her with change. Please come by and say hello to your mother. Oh yeah, I just got back from work. The neighbor's sarcasm. Make Happiness say nothing. You just walked by fast. Your heart rises with bitterness. Into the house. Put the basket down and sit back in the chair. She sat quietly in the empty house. The eyes look far away, happy to have a happy family. She was a woman who was admired by many. But now, all that's left is solitude and shame. But I tell myself I have to try. It's becoming more and more bitter. She hated the gossip of the villagers. The eyes of pity. You are no longer the gentle woman you used to be. There was only hatred and revenge in her heart. For those who turned their back on you. Clench your teeth in anger. You guys just wait. One day I'll show you. Money can buy all morality. Can morality feed courage to decide? There's no need to preserve image or identity. She began to solicit the men in the village in a way brazen. It's like revenge on those who laughed at me. The rich men, being seduced by Happiness, can't resist her attraction. It's nice to meet a rich man. You know I can still give you what you need. This village woman is so good to me. Despite being despised, it is good to make money from men. And more she's taking advantage of her charm to make them obey. One afternoon, more Happiness at home. She lies in the room, thinking of how to get through the night riding or transform it into another form. The day I met my father-in-law, I feel more frustrated. He's the father-in-law of Happiness, who's a stingy and cruel patriarch. All these years, I've liked money. Since the day my son died, my daughter-in-law has no money. But he always despised his daughter-in-law. In your eyes, Happiness is just a poor and stupid young girl, only good at eating a portable flower pot. But since hearing about Happiness, in his heart began to rise despair. His wife is an older woman, weak health and long-term back pain. He no longer finds her attractive. There's a dark desire in my head. Whenever you think about Happiness, the charming daughter-in-law was famous for practicing. You can see Happiness from a distance. Face glowed, devilish mouth muttered. You're my daughter-in-law, but you're not the woman of this family anymore. You're the money maker now. I want to try it too. One evening after the whole family had fallen asleep, he crept into the hall. He stood outside the door, taking a deep breath. Try to control your excitement. His mind was spinning with the thought of, Happiness may become your own commodity. He knocked at the door hoarse. Dad, please talk to me. I was sitting inside, listening to my father's voice. You guessed his intentions. You're not surprised. You're not angry. Her eyes were empty, looking out the door. There's not a bit of emotion. You are so used to the darkness of life. The door opens. He walked in with a fake face to care. But his eyes flashed over the body of Happiness, a half-coaxing voice. I've heard a lot about you lately. I know you're just a piece of bread because of Tongue, but you know I can help you. I just need you to give me a night. Look at the peace. There's no shame in my head anymore. You've lost so much in this life. What else to keep? She looked straight at his face. My eyes are cold and empty. Your voice is calm. I want you to serve me, right? But do you have money? He couldn't believe his ears. Take the daughter-in-law you once despised. Now I agree easily. He laughed silently in his stomach, satisfied with your plan. He nodded, his voice hoarse. I can make money as long as you make me happy. Since that night, Happiness has not only been his daughter-in-law, but also the young lover in his hands. He began to use his relationship with Happiness to talk to the men in the village. He wants you and is tired of your charm. He told the men in the village, I have a very good eye. Do you want to try it? I'm glad it has a price, but guaranteed to be worth 8 rice. People in the village from old to young, I can't resist the charm of Happiness. They come to you not just out of curiosity, it's because of your sloth and bravery that they're mesmerized. Happiness becomes an unofficial boss of dirty games. They'd to stop using it to make money and satisfy his desires. A man tells you, with bright eyes, it is true that men know how to behave. I haven't seen anyone like her. His friend nodded and laughed. Money is everything. It was a good evening to return home after a visit. The house was quiet, but Tongue was waiting for her in her room. Red eyes, red face, 7 hope. His voice full of anger. Mom, wherever you go, you disappear every night. Do you know how I've suffered? Take off the scarf with a sigh. Come and sit in the chair opposite your son. There was no regret in his calm eyes. You don't have to worry about me. I know what I'm doing. I woke up screaming. What I'm doing. Do you know what everyone in the village says? You've changed. You're destroying yourself. Stand up. His eyes lit up and he walked quickly towards Tongue. My strong voice does not destroy itself. I live for myself and for you. I think life is easy. Do you know how I sacrificed? Hesitating with a thick voice. You scared me. I didn't recognize you. Happy to laugh. You will understand when you grow up. Don't interfere in my life. Back, his voice choked in despair. I'm not your mother anymore. Glad not to say anything more. She just turned her back and walked into the room, leaving Tongue with a complete break in his heart. The more it gets late, the winds howl through the slits. Every storm hits the roof, as if to tear down the entire family's house. Tongue lies on the bed wide-eyed at the ceiling. I can't sleep. Strange noises that make me feel insecure. Suddenly, a soft footsteps echoed from the hallway. Tongue sat up, hands stretched out, listening to the sound of scraping footsteps. Not too fast, but steady. It's like that AI creeping through your front door. Tiptoed out of the room. The light from the flickering oil lamp in the house, just enough to see the virtual open shadows. I'm creeping, following, until standing at the door of my grandfather's room. The door cracked open. Inside, the faint light from the oil lamp seeming raw, and I can hear the rustling, the whisper. But the voice is ringing. These are not normal words. It's an unusual, haunting sound. Happy, thou hoarse voice. You're the only one who can do this for me. Tongue is now 17 years old. I understand the words that haunt you. Tongue stood silent at the door, his mind spinning. I can't believe my ears. Take a few more steps and look through the door. And right in front of you, your mother and grandfather are getting married. In a naked body scene. Tongue stepped back, unable to believe his eyes. The old man returned to his room. Try to stop yourself from screaming. I thought my feet were heavy. The pain choking my chest. Your mother whom you love. The one you always thought was carrying the family. Do this again. with the grandfather himself. The feeling of disgust, shame, and guilt filled my mind. Love for my mother suddenly became contradictory with unspeakable disgust. I can't accept the truth that's in front of me, but I don't know what to do. My grandmother has always loved taking care of me. Do you know this? My grandmother couldn't hide the pain anymore. You've known it all for a long time. The strange noise, the stealthy glances of virtue and harmony make her suffer silently. Body humiliation corroded her mind. It made her more and more sick. You don't know how to face this truth. Her husband, who used to be the head of the family, now he's a pervert. It's raining every day these days. I can't leave the house. The rain is still falling tonight on the roof of the old house. Every drop of rain pouring down the yard into the ground beneath my feet. It's made up of puddles of water. His house is nestled in the village, hidden behind the wild trees in the thick night. The daughter-in-law in the house, walking quietly into the room at the end of the hallway. Her walk flexibly, her back slim and long hair wet with water drooping, clinging to the thin fabric of your shirt. She's not in a hurry. Distracted eyes, but in my heart is filled with calculations. It's raining, the air is a little cold. He lies all alone, feeling empty. He couldn't control it. He blinks and pulls happiness into his room. The oil lamps flickered from that room. I can see the two people close by. The cowardly breath echoed, and in the rain outside, quietly whispered happiness. Old man, but he knows how. More than the boys in the village. Her voice was soft and teasing. His eyes glanced at the man. I'm sweating on my body. He breathed quickly. You know how to drive me crazy. You only belong to me, Happy. Don't let anyone get in your way. He whispered harmoniously. The rough armored hands stroked the daughter-in-law's soft skin. His breath was heavy. The room was filled with a stuffy atmosphere of deception and lust. Suddenly, a noise came from the hallway. The door popped open. Lan, his wife, stood dumbfounded at the door. Her eyes widened and her body trembled. You've suspected for a long time, but now I've seen this with my own eyes. You can't control it anymore. The whole house seemed to shake at her scream. Indecent clothes. What are you going to turn this house into? Startle yourself to stop, but in your eyes, it's just cold and challenging. He sat there without any remorse. She screamed out her tears. Are you still my daughter-in-law? You humiliated this family. Your husband died. You're not sorry to do this shit. I hurriedly looked up at my mother-in-law. Not showing any remorse, she just wrapped a piece of cloth around her. Looking straight into her eyes, she thought I had to live my whole life like Sao. He's fine. More than the men out there. Mrs. Lan screamed, Get your shameless daughter-in-law out of my house. He rose from the bed with a loud voice. Shut up. You're my wife. But you don't have the strength to do anything else. Whatever he does, it's his business. Take care of your health. Lan is angry. Red eyes of anger come alive. Take up the good hands. Pull her out. There was a big argument echoing through the house. Why the hell are you humiliating this family? I won't leave you alone. Happy hands, get rid of Mrs. Lan. Her voice was filled with anger and contempt. I'm not afraid of her. He still needs me. I'm here. The old woman is no longer of any value to him. He was in a hurry to get dressed. Out in the middle of the room, his face flushed with shame and anger. Stop it now. My relationship with him has nothing to do with you. All her life she's been nagging. It makes me happy. It makes me happy, you know? Tung was studying in the next room. I heard a noise and rushed out. Hurry out. Shouting and pushing still angry Grandpa's mother. You two know what you're doing. Two people are humiliating this house. Still standing there with cold eyes looking at her son. You have nothing to hide. You don't care what Tung saw. Coldly replied, Your father is dead. I have to live my life.
Don't get involved in my business.
Hearing those words was like being stabbed in the heart. My love for you seems to fall apart. I can't believe that my mother, who used to take care of you, now it's become so cold and so brazen. His eyes were red and his voice trembling. Mom, what a person you've become. I'm not your mother anymore. My grandmother is standing next to me, my shoulders trembling with weakness and pain. She doesn't recognize her family anymore. She was choking. You bastard, get out of my house. She said. She went ahead and slapped him hard in the face. I see my wife grabbing happiness. He couldn't control it anymore. Push up Mrs. Ra, pushing so hard that she fell to the floor. Head banged against the side of the cabinet. Blood started pouring out on the floor. The sound of her steel startled the entire household. No one can react. Granny, how do you do this? My grandmother's eyes were filled with pain. More and more blood flowed from her head. Panicked, he turned to look at him and happy. They're both standing in the sky in a panic. He accidentally touched the small knife on the table. Hands trembling, eyes clouded with rage. Tung took the Luo knife towards him. In a split second, Tung could not restrain his actions. The knife went straight into his chest. Blood spray out, soaking wet his shirt. He stumbled and fell on the spot. His face turned pale. His eyes were filled with wonder and fear before completely shutting down. Oh my God, Tung. You killed your grandfather and you're crazy. She screamed, her voice full of panic. My grandmother saw the scene in front of her, eyes full of pain, but she understood that Tung did not mean to. You can't let your granddaughter take the blame. She lies on the ground, her mouth is constantly whispering. His hands trembled with a weak voice. Tung, calm down to lose your future. When my grandmother said this, she was dying of blood loss. The poor neighborhood was shocked that night. When he saw the screaming at his house and Mrs. Lan, they ran to see Tung sitting with his head between the two bodies. Tung was arrested at night. No one is happy, because she was in a hurry to pull the thin jacket. Quick step out the door. I can't stay. I can't get involved in this. Tung killed him. And you know, I can't help but be involved if I stay. She hurried out in the rain. The shadow fades behind the dark night. When the police drag Tung out of the house, you feel like you're being pushed into a nightmare. There's no escape. Your hands are handcuffed, but your mind is spinning with a series of horrifying images. My grandmother is lying motionless on the floor, blood-soaked, and then Grandpa's picture. He was killed in anger. It can't be controlled. Feelings of guilt and excitement tear your soul apart, but now it's too late. Not only did he lose his grandmother, he also lost his mother, someone you think you love, but now it's the source of all tragedy. You feel like the world has turned its back on you. The police put Tung in the car. It's still raining. The lightning tore through the sky inside the house. Everything has become silent and dead. After going through tragedies, and the interfaith relationship was exposed, glad to have left the village, she walked into the city with empty hands, bringing shame and despair. Instead of choosing to rebuild your life, it's good to be caught up in a criminal underworld, where she became a link in the human trafficking network. Years and months go by. From a suffering woman, happiness becomes a cruel person, taking advantage of the innocence and unhappiness of young girls, always trying to deceive yourself. Everything you do is just to survive. But in my heart, you know very well that every action she did hurt someone else. To feel well, it's slowly becoming ingrained in my soul, but I don't know how to turn around. Every night I sit facing myself in the mirror, face makeup thoroughly, but I can't hide the emptiness in my eyes. Tung was sentenced to 15 years in prison. During his years in prison, you live with regret and family obsession. I've had haunting dreams about my mother, my grandmother, and the scene that night, on the day he returned home. But notice the stigma of the villagers. Grief makes me want to escape reality. He decided to leave his hometown and go to the city to find a job. Tung tried to rebuild his life, but I'm tormented by my sins. I'm looking for a job at a construction site, in the hope of starting life over again. I know that this journey will be difficult. It's a dark afternoon when Tung came back from the construction site with his hands down. The dust was all over my old clothes. As I walked back to the motel, I saw a young woman sitting in front of the room. Eyes watery, body trembling. There was panic on her pale face. It's like having a nightmare. He closed his eyes full of doubt. He came closer and tried to investigate Tung. Are you okay? Need some help? The girl named Mai raised her head. He looked at her with both fear and despair. You can't believe in anyone, but there's no other option. Her voice trembled. Tomorrow is sweet. Baby, can you help me? I don't know where to go. They trick me into doing terrible things. Flirting at you, feeling of anxiety rising in my heart. I've heard a lot about people smugglers in the city to defraud young girls from the countryside with the promise of a better life. But what tomorrow says makes you feel even more shocked. Red Eyes Tomorrow. They promise to give you a good job. But when you get here, they made me work in brothels and disguised sewing workshops. If you don't listen, they will kill you. She's the head of it all. The name of Virtue echoed like a strong punch to Tin Tung. You can't be dead. Is that your mother? But when I saw the picture, the more I realized that the woman I'm talking about, she's my real mother, Mrs. Han. Tung could not sleep. The words of tomorrow echoes in my head like cries of supplication. Your mother whom you once loved. Turns out she never did. He's now the head of a human trafficking ring. Cruel. Your mother has sent so many girls to hell. Everything seemed to collapse at Tung's feet. I don't know what to do. Tung stepped out of the cramped room. My feet take me aimlessly through the city at night. Streetlights flashing on the street. My heart is troubled. The truth is too hard to believe. But if that's true, I can't be silent. Tung must know the truth. Tung decided, let's start with the places tomorrow mentioned. Labor zones where girls are tricked and exploited. I went to a diner, where there are some workers and people who work underground often gather inside the stifling air, the dim light and the murmuring voices echoing. Sit down in a corner, out of sight. Observe the people around you. Suddenly, a middle-aged man walked in. Looks sluggish, but there's a little bit of cunning about how to move. That's the first half. In the people, I used to work on human trafficking. According to information Tung found out, he nodded at the owner of the restaurant. A bottle of wine to drink tonight. Take a deep breath and try to stay calm. He walked closer to the round and sat down next to him. He pretended to be friendly. Where do you work? I also work in construction. But there's not much going on these days. Looking at Tung from head to toe, my eyes sparkled with suspicion, but it's also more comfortable. Light laughter. The work must be extreme. I'm just doing some errands. Brothers in the profession together, who do what? He tried to look like there was nothing unusual. Tung asked the probe. Heard, some brothels are also hiring more people. They may also earn quite a bit. You know where? He raised his eyebrows and laughed. Take a look around. Round whisper. Everything has a price, but you have to be careful. It's not as simple as you think. Open your mouth here and talk. There is no way to live. The conversation continues to drag on. Tung tries to be patient. Each question seems intertwined. Get more information from the game. Finally, it's a name that I can't believe. To the round whispered worried eyes. There's a big boss. She's in control, from brothel sewing to the sale of girls. No one dared to touch her. Her name is Achin. Holding my breath, my mother's name. Your heart stops beating in a moment. Your hands are so tight. The joints white fingers. Try to stay calm and ask more. She runs the sow. I heard that it must be good to do it. Then I poured another glass of wine for myself. Round deep voice. Good is not good, it's cruel. Do you know how many girls she sold into brothels? Not many people had to die. For not being able to fight her, she uses power, money, and relationships to maintain this network. Tung bowed his head, feeling of anger and pain welling up in my heart. Your mother is behind all these crimes. Suppress the outrage, the trembling voice. So has anyone ever been against her? Smiling, Khan's voice was full of sarcasm. There are some who dare to try, but they all disappeared without a trace. Ms. Hai not only has money, but there are also a network of juniors willing to do anything for her. Tung stood up and couldn't hear anymore. I know I can't get through this. Your mother has gone too deep into sin, and if you don't stop, how many more people will suffer? Tomorrow and the other girls went through. Tung left the bar, my legs trembling, but my mind is clearer than ever. I've got to do something. He stopped at an empty street corner and pulled out his phone. Call a friend who works in the police. I knew him before I went to prison. His voice was determined. I have information about an adult trafficking case. I need your help, but everything is confidential. We need to break this line. The friend's voice on the other end of the line was full of surprise. But also quickly agreed. The man's voice was firm. Okay, but you have to be careful. It's a big deal. It's not easy. Keep your eyes fixed on the space in front of you. Tongue cold. I know I'll do anything to stop this. From that moment on, Tung no longer turned his head. I know that what you're about to do will change your life forever. Not only yours, but your mother's. But I have no choice. Truth must be exposed, even if it makes you lose everything. Fast steps into the night. Prepare for the final confrontation. The truth, no matter how cruel, must still be brought to light. Tung's investigation is over with a bold decision, an inevitable confrontation between you and your mother. It's late at night. The lights from Mrs. Han's remote villa, still singing Ra, illuminates the large surrounding area. Behind that gorgeous exterior, it's an underground transaction. Young girls locked up in cargo cars, waiting for my painful fate. Hiding in the dark, the eyes don't leave. The cars are quietly rolling into the villa yard. I clenched my fist. Eyes on the ground. This shipment has to be stopped. It's all in the plan. The police were notified. It's just waiting for the time when you ruin everything. He crept closer to the delivery area, hiding behind a high wall. From this distance, Tung can clearly see Mrs. Han's hands and feet. Checking each car. Bright headlights illuminated the yard. A cold laugh echoed from Tuan. Han Tuan's lover laughed. This trip is going well. They won't know what's going on. Slowly frowning but not showing emotions. You're hiding behind a box, staring at people, is slowly leaving the car. Finally, when the time comes, Tung quickly cut the connecting electronic devices in the car. Damage to the alarm system. One of the boys gave an order. The last car inspection should not be missed. Tung tries to keep breathing. I know I don't have much time. The rustling footsteps of the juniors getting closer and closer. It makes me feel like my heart. I want to jump out of my chest. The police will arrive in a few minutes, but Tung needs to mess up before they could find out. He quickly opened the door to one of the cars, sneaking inside. Inside, I saw the terrified eyes of the girls, locked up their shivering white faces. The girl whispered softly, "Who are you? Please save us." And then he motioned for them to be quiet. He spoke in a serious voice. "The police are coming. You have to be a little more patient." He quickly unlocks the door. Create a way out for the girls. The footsteps outside the car are getting closer. The spleen is out. Close the car door and hide behind a large container. The police whistle sounded from a distance. My husband and I immediately noticed the abnormality. He roared full of anger. "Really dead? Someone has called the police, and you have to check it. Bring the traitor out." While her juniors were dancing, looking for the traitor, Tung tried to hide, but not long after. "One of my boys found out about you. That guy is screaming. The traitor here caught him." Tung knows he was exposed. He rushed out of hiding but didn't make it. Two of her brothers entered, hold me tight to the ground and drag me to the yard, where Tuan is waiting. Smiling coldly, I looked down from above. I didn't expect you to destroy this shipment. It's all so big. Tung was forced to kneel, but your eyes still won't give in. Spare voice challenge. Your shipment is finished, and the police will be here soon. Tuan grabbed Tung's collar and pulled him up. Tuan screeched, "You think you can fight me? Why are you an idiot?" But right then and there, Mrs. Han appeared. You don't know. The man that Tuan and his men had just caught was Tung. Her son Han ordered his eyes to shine coldly. "Kill him. You don't have to keep him." I looked at my mother with wide eyes. She didn't realize that everything was slowing down. I gritted my teeth again, looking straight at her face. Mrs. Han stood still. Her face immediately turned pale. When I see a face full of hurt, of my son, all the emotions in her heart exploded. Grunts and trembles. "No, it's impossible." He stood next to me without hesitation. Smiling, he pulled the gun out of his jacket, aimed straight at Tung. Poisonous accent. "It's a threat. Then let me deal with this." The day when you pull the trigger, Mrs. Han Lao came to push Tung aside. The bullet shot through her chest. Shouting out in panic, Han's mother fell down quickly and groped every chest of clothes. "Get on your knees and raise your head." Tears streamed down her cheeks. Everything around seems to fall apart. She breathed hard and looked at Tung with weak eyes. "Tung, I'm sorry. I was wrong." The police car horn sounded nearby. They ran away, but the police came, controlled the entire scene, and Tung hugged her mother. Tears fell on her cheek. Slowly speaking in a choking voice, Mom tried. Mrs. Han smiled weakly. Her last words crumbled in the air. She whispered, "You are so wrong, Tung. A lifetime of solitude. Now I have no AI. Live well. Changing the lives of parents and grandparents. I'm not a bad kid. Don't be pessimistic about fate. Germany wins the number. In this life, I paid it off. I don't think I'm okay." Her voice is getting weaker. I sat there in pain. "So your family doesn't have an AI? I am officially orphaned by my mother and father. Your fate has filled you to the end of your pain." She was happy to be taken to the emergency room. But death is inevitable. The wound is too heavy. Tung ran under the CSUP opened, the pale face. One more time, you witnessed the death of a loved one. In the last minutes, sobbing and holding my mother's hand. "Mom, I forgive you. Don't worry." Ms. Han closed her eyes. A relieved smile appeared on her face. Her life was full of suffering and sin, finally ended up in late remorse. The police rescued the girls who were arrested. The whole human trafficking ring. Tuan and his men were sent to prison. Tung left the city to return to the village. Your story land spread everywhere. Everyone in the village no longer look at you with contempt, but with compassion and admiration. Your old house, rebuilt by the villagers together. It's a reminder that even if you're wrong, people can still make amends. Tomorrow, the young girl I saved, I also decided to stay with you. Together, they rebuild their lives. Let's heal the wounds of the past. You two build a life together. From the ashes of ruin, all the donations. Tung realized that life always opens up opportunities so that man can atone and get back on the right track. As long as they recognize their mistakes and the courage to face it. Mistakes are not the end. It's a lesson for people to grow and live better. Dear friends, the short story is over. It's a great story, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to the channel, like and share support for Quine Wong. Hello, and see you and friends again in new stories. It's broadcast regularly on the channel, and see you later.